A billionaire mocked his poor father until the father returned as his own son. Welcome to Tales by Steph, a home of interesting African stories. Once upon a time in Lagos, Nigeria, there lived a very rich man named Kunle. He was a billionaire, so wealthy that he owned a big mansion on Banana Island, a place dubbed the Paradise for Billionaires in Lagos. Kunle had everything money could buy: fast cars, servants, and a beautiful wife named Lola. But despite all his riches, Kunle's heart was unkind. He had a poor old father who lived alone in a faraway village, and Kunle never cared about him. The old man had raised Kunle alone after Kunle's mother left. Even when he had very little, the father provided for his son and never abandoned him. But now that Kunle was rich, he treated his father badly and called him cruel names. "That useless drunkard," Kunle would say, forgetting how his father struggled to raise him. Whenever the old man called on the phone to greet his son, Kunle and Lola would put the call on speaker and laugh at him. They mocked his shaky voice and simple words. Lola would giggle and say, "Your father sounds so silly." They both agreed the old man was worthless. Neighbors who knew Kunle's father often asked, "Why don't you help your dad?" Kunle only cared about appearances, not love. He spent lavishly on Lola's fancy clothes and parties, but sent nothing to his lonely father. One day, news came from the village that Kunle's father had become seriously ill. The old man's neighbors were worried he might die with no one to help. They called Kunle and said, "Your father is very sick. Please come." Kunle didn't want to go at first. He was too busy enjoying life in the city. But then he thought about what people would say if his father died alone. "If I don't bring him here, everyone will call me a wicked son," he told Lola. So, just for fear of gossip, Kunle traveled to the village to fetch his father. He pretended to care in front of the villagers, saying, "I will take Papa to the city for the best care." The villagers were relieved, thinking Kunle was finally doing the right thing. Kunle brought his weak father to the mansion in Lagos. The old man's eyes widened at the sight of Kunle's grand home, with its tall gate and fancy cars. He had never seen such luxury, but inside no warmth awaited him. Lola was unhappy that the sick, frail man was staying with them. She wrinkled her nose at him and complained, "Do we really have to keep him here? He smells of the village." Kunle's father felt hurt but remained quiet. Kunle gave his father a small guest room in the back of the house, far from their fancy living room. "Just stay here and rest," Kunle said without a smile. He did not bother to call a doctor, thinking the old man was just weak from hunger. "The poor man is just hungry," Kunle told his wife. "Give him some food and he'll be fine." But Lola hardly fed the old man at all. When Kunle was at work, Lola would deny the father food, telling him, "You've eaten already," when it was a lie. She wanted the old man gone and spent her time buying jewelry and clothes instead of helping him. When Kunle returned, Lola lied that she had fed his father well, and Kunle, not really caring, believed her. The old father grew thinner and weaker in the rich man's house than he had been in his village hut. A few weeks later, the time came for Lola to give birth to their first child. Kunle was excited to have a baby, but he was also annoyed because his father's health was worse. That day, Kunle rushed Lola to a private hospital to deliver the baby, leaving his sick father alone at home. The old man was so ill he could barely move from bed. He called out weakly for water, but no one was there. The servants had been given time off to prepare for the baby's arrival celebration. As Lola delivered a healthy baby boy at the hospital, Kunle cheered in joy. "It's a bouncing baby boy," the nurse announced. Kunle was so happy to be a father that for a moment he forgot about his own father lying sick and alone. At that very same hour, back at the mansion, Kunle's father took his final breaths. The old man's eyes were full of tears, not just from pain, but from feeling unloved. With no son or family by his side, he whispered a prayer and died quietly in his bed. Later that day, Kunle returned home with Lola and their newborn son, only to find the house silent and cold. A servant nervously told him, "Sir, your father, he has passed away." Kunle paused for a moment. He felt a tiny pinch of guilt, but Lola quickly interrupted any sorrow. "Oh dear, that's unfortunate," she said flatly, more focused on the baby in her arms. Kunle nodded slowly. He arranged a simple burial for his father, not wanting to spend much money or time. There were no big funerals or ceremonies, just a quick goodbye. Kunle was mostly relieved that this burden was gone, and he could now enjoy his newborn son. The same day his poor father was buried, Kunle threw a lavish naming ceremony for his baby with music and food. They named the boy Iomide, meaning, "My joy has come." And indeed, Kunle and Lola were full of joy for themselves. They showed no remorse about the father's death, acting as if nothing had happened. In Yoruba culture, when a baby is born soon after a grandparent dies, people often name the child Babatunde, meaning, "Father has returned." But Kunle did not even think to honor his father this way. After baby Iomide came home, things started to change in Kunle's household. At first, all seemed well. The baby looked ordinary, chubby, and cute. But Kunle and Lola soon noticed something strange. Iomide, barely a few months old, would laugh and giggle at odd times. It wasn't the sweet laughter of a happy baby at play. Instead, it happened each time Kunle and Lola talked about their problems. And problems were starting to appear like dark clouds over their once sunny life. It began small. One evening, Kunle was complaining about a failed business deal at the dinner table. He had lost a lot of money in a sudden market crash, and he was very upset. Lola was scolding him, "How could you lose money? I wanted a new car." As they argued, baby Iomide sat in his crib nearby. Suddenly, the baby let out a bright, cheerful laugh. He laughed and laughed, almost as if he understood what they were saying and found it funny. Kunle and Lola stopped and stared at him. Why would a baby laugh when his parents were upset? Lola picked him up, and the baby just looked at his father with a strange twinkle in his eyes, still giggling. Kunle felt a chill but shook it off. "He's just a baby. They laugh at anything," he muttered. But it didn't stop. In the following weeks, more misfortunes fell upon them. Kunle's biggest company was accused of fraud and had to pay heavy fines. Then one of his luxury cars mysteriously caught fire in the garage one night. A week later, robbers broke into their house and stole expensive jewelry and cash. Each time something bad happened, Kunle and Lola would sit together, worrying and arguing about their troubles. And baby Iomide would start laughing uncontrollably. He would clap his tiny hands and chuckle as if it was the funniest show on earth. This was no coincidence. Kunle was starting to feel scared of his own child. "Why does he laugh when we suffer?" Lola whispered with fear. The baby's laughter was not innocent anymore. It felt eerie, almost like an old man's knowing chuckle coming from a tiny body. As months passed, Kunle's fortune continued to crumble. He had to sell one property after another to pay his debts and keep his businesses afloat. Lola, who used to shop every week on the most expensive streets of Lagos, sold her gold necklaces and designer dresses to buy food. The mansion on Banana Island, their paradise, was sold off to pay the bank. Kunle and Lola moved out and had to rent a small one-room apartment in a crowded part of Lagos. It was the kind of place they never imagined they would live. The room was tiny, with a leaky roof and cracked walls. At night, they could hear the noise of generators and traffic from the busy street outside. All they had left was a little furniture and, of course, baby Iomide. Kunle was filled with shame and regret. Neighbors who saw him now couldn't believe this tired, worried man was once a billionaire. Lola was angry and bitter, blaming Kunle. "This is all your fault. What kind of man loses everything?" she shouted. They often quarreled, sitting on their only old couch. Every time they fought or cried over their situation, Iomide would start his laughing again. The baby never seemed to cry, only laugh and stare at them with a curious look. One night the power went out and the room was dark. Kunle lit a small lantern. In the dim light, Iomide woke up and looked at his parents talking in hushed, worried voices about money. The baby gave a soft giggle. Kunle saw the baby's face under the lantern glow, and for a second he felt he saw his father's face in the child. He blinked, and the illusion was gone, but his heart pounded. Could it be? He thought, but he pushed the idea away. Guilt was eating at Kunle's mind now, and strange thoughts came to him in the dark. Lola, on the other hand, became suspicious. She visited a pastor and then a fortune-teller, desperate to find out why they had such terrible luck. One herbalist she consulted told her, "Someone in your family might be cursed or carrying a spirit." This made Lola eye baby Iomide with fear. Could their own child be bringing them bad luck? It seemed unthinkable, but all the bad events started after he was born, and there was that weird laughter every time. Kunle and Lola stopped finding joy in the baby's laughter. Instead, it sent shivers down their spines. They started to believe that Iomide was part of their problem. Still, he was their only child. They never imagined harming him. "Maybe someone bewitched him," Kunle said, voice full of worry. They thought of many possibilities, perhaps a jealous relative or an angry spirit from Kunle's village. But they never once considered that it could be the spirit of Kunle's own father, watching them through the child's eyes, chuckling at their downfall. As things went from bad to worse, Kunle and Lola grew more desperate. They were running out of money completely, sometimes even struggling to afford a loaf of bread. Yet Iomide never fell ill, never cried for anything. He always seemed content, especially when they were miserable. One day, after the landlord came knocking for rent they couldn't pay, Kunle slumped to the floor in despair. Lola sat next to him, tears in her eyes. "We have lost everything. What do we do now?" she wept. In the silence that followed, a small gurgling laugh rose from the baby on the bed. Lola looked at Iomade and screamed, "Stop laughing!" The baby just smiled at her, which sent a bolt of fear through her. She turned to Kunle, eyes wide with a terrible idea. Maybe the pastor was right. Maybe Iomide is cursed. Kunle frowned, not wanting to believe it, but he could not ignore how unnatural the baby's behavior was. Finally, Lola whispered, "What if we get rid of the baby? Maybe our luck will return." Kunle was shocked. "Get rid of him? He's our son," he said. But Lola shook her head, trembling. "I don't mean hurt him. I mean, take him to an orphanage. We can say he's not ours, that we found him or something." She looked around nervously. "We can't go on like this, Kunle. I'm scared of him sometimes, the way he looks at us. And we can't even feed ourselves, let alone a child." Kunle's face was full of conflict. Deep down, he loved his baby boy as any father would, or at least he tried to. But the constant laughter, the strange timing, and the ruin of his wealth had made him fear his own child. He remembered how poorly he treated his own father and felt a pang of guilt. But he quickly buried it. Maybe, just maybe, if Iomide was gone, their fortunes might change. After all, everything fell apart after the child arrived. Kunle finally agreed to Lola's plan with a heavy heart. "Just for a while, until we get back on our feet," he lied to himself. That week, Kunle and Lola visited a distant orphanage on the outskirts of the city. They lied to the staff, saying they found an abandoned baby by the roadside. The orphanage matron looked at adorable Iomide and felt pity. She agreed to take him in. Lola kissed Iomide's cheek one last time. The baby giggled and tried to grab her hair. and Kunle turned away, unable to watch. As they left the orphanage gate, Lola let out a sigh of relief. Kunle felt tears in his eyes, but he told himself this was for the best. They had given up their only child, hoping to also give up the curse they believed came with him. Kunle and Lola returned to their tiny apartment that evening. The rooms felt emptier and strangely silent without Iomide's presence. For the first time in a long while, they had an evening without the baby's laughter. Yet they did not feel happy or free. Kunle sat on the bed, guilt gnawing at him. "Did we do the right thing?" he asked quietly. Lola, though sad, said firmly, "We had no choice. We can't live like that anymore. Maybe now our luck will turn around." They ate a simple dinner of gari, cassava flakes, soaked in water, the cheapest meal they could manage. It was a poor man's supper, the kind Kunle's father used to eat alone in the village. This thought made Kunle's throat tighten. He remembered his father's voice and how he had laughed at him. Shame burned in his heart. Night fell and the couple prepared to sleep. Outside, the city noise died down. Lola fumbled with the key as they returned from the shared bathroom down the hall. Suddenly, as they stood at their apartment door, they both froze. Through the thin wooden door, they heard a sound that made their blood turn to ice, the sound of a baby's cry. It was coming from inside their one-room home. Conley's hands began to shake as he pushed the door open. The room was dark, lit only by moonlight through the window. On the small bed in the corner, they saw a tiny figure wriggling and heard the cry, turning into a familiar babyish giggle. Lola gasped, "Iomide!" There on the bed sat baby Iomide, kicking his little legs and looking straight at them with shining eyes. It was impossible. They had just left him at the orphanage miles away. Lola felt faint and Kunle's heart pounded like a drum. The baby's giggle grew louder in the silent room. To Kunle, it didn't sound like a baby anymore. It sounded like the echo of an old man's laughter. Kunle suddenly remembered the Yoruba proverb his grandfather used to say, "Omode feku o ni enu agba arun." Disrespect for elders is a death wish. In that terrifying moment, Kunle finally understood. Tears streamed down his face as he realized what he had done and who was now with them. His poor father's spirit had never left. It had been watching and laughing through the child all along. Kunle and Lola stood trembling in the doorway, eyes wide with shock. They could not move or speak. Baby Iomide, or the spirit that lived within him, just laughed and laughed, the sound filling the tiny room. The once proud billionaire and his wife were now face to face with the consequences of their cruelty, trapped in a nightmare of their own making. And as the eerie laughter of the baby echoed into the night, it was clear that the story was far from over, and the lesson would never be forgotten by those who heard it. Truly, as the elders warn, never mistreat your parents or elders, for their tears may return to you in ways you cannot imagine. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, like, and comment for more unique stories.